This is Top of the Morning. I'm Steve Izant.
And I'm Jacqueline Massaro.
We are here on board the USS Constellation in beautiful downtown Baltimore. It's a beautiful day today to be on the ship.
It is. It's wonderful.
We have, though, a very special show coming up. It takes place in downtown Washington. It's the 25th anniversary of Nancy Pelosi's service to the nation.
That is a very long time to be in Congress.
It's a very long time, and what makes it even more special is that she's interviewed by Rachel Maddow.
Wow.
So we have roughly 40 minutes of a great back and forth between Nancy Pelosi and Rachel Maddow. Some very interesting topics are talked about, and much of the time issues that she's faced, how she's dealt with them. Things that were interesting to me was how she respects President George W. Bush, even though they're obviously very different politically.
They are.
Extremely differently, and yet she worked with him on some issues that, for example, No Child Left Behind, which is a very important educational issue for the nation. So it's a wonderful show. I think our audience will enjoy it. So we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
I'll start with a very special thank you to our friends and underwriters for today's program, Peter and Judy Kovler. Thank you so much. On behalf of our partnership with the National Women's History Museum, we're honored to host this celebration for the first female Speaker of the House and current Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you all so much for being here. I'm used to talking to people but never seeing their faces. So I'm going to start with admitting my own bias here in the sense of fairness, which is also sort of admitting my concurrent interest. You are the member of Congress for my brother. My parents were married in the chapel of the Presidio, which when my father was a captain in the Air Force, and when it ceased to be a military base, you are the reason it was returned to the people of the state of California and the city of San Francisco for their use. When I lived in San Francisco, you were my member of Congress. And as a gay kid growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 80s, amid the devastation of the AIDS crisis, coming of age and realizing I was a gay person at the time of the AIDS crisis, and it's almost unimaginable context for somebody growing up. When you first went to Congress in June of 1987, and in your first remarks as a member of Congress said that you were there to fight AIDS. For me, as a gay person, as a caretaker for people with AIDS, as an AIDS activist, you became the person who all of us believed that no matter where we lived anywhere in the country, that you were our member of Congress. So. 25 years in Congress, you are the most powerful woman in American politics ever. You've cracked what you called the marble ceiling. And I wondered if you could describe how the marble ceiling works and how it works more poorly now that you have cracked it.
Well, first of all, Rachel, thank you for your very kind introductory remarks, for honoring us with your presence here today. I couldn't wait to get here to see Rachel Maddow. And that your connection to San Francisco Bay Area, the Presidio, the heart of San Francisco, is one that we take great pride in and brag about, exaggerate, and again, are just so proud of you. My voice is changing, it's because there's like an air conditioning here that comes on and off. But I want to thank Sewell Wellman House for giving and museum for giving this opportunity for us to come together to talk about issues that are of concern to women in America, and that includes everything. And as Rachel has demonstrated, that even includes the national security of our country. Congratulations on your book. It's very important that women's faces of opinion and leadership.
Well, welcome back. I think one of the issues that this show tackles here in Nancy Pelosi's comments are women in politics.
You know, you don't see many women in politics nowadays, and Nancy Pelosi's election was a very big deal.
Well, it certainly has been. And when you think of all the years that women were running for Congress, it's still a very low percentage when compared to the number of men that are both in the Senate and in the Congress.
It is, and I hope to see more in the future. There's a lot of intelligent women out there who would do great things for our country.
They absolutely would. But let's get back to our show.
You've been able to talk in a way that I think has very much energized Democrats about the connection between policy and social justice, like we just were. Policy and important outcomes for the country. One of the policy fights that you won, which I think had profound political impact, it doesn't get a lot of attention when people talk about your rise to power as Speaker, was right after George W. Bush was reelected in 2004. He was reelected in November 2004. As soon as he was inaugurated in January 2005, he set out around the country on a barnstorming tour to privatize Social Security. And that went great. And when he started to do this, he thought he was going to win, and his poll numbers looked good. And you were a key part of what I think has to be universally acknowledged as a Democratic defeat of that Republican initiative. How did you beat George W. Bush on that subject?
Well, it was a decision that we made that we were going to preserve Social Security. And this is a pillar of our society, of security, retirement security for our seniors, and all that that meant to the rest of the family. And so when I had the opportunity to become a leader, of course it was my goal to attain the majority. And we went to some people on the outside, to the private sector, and said, if you were, I don't know any of these things, but if you were, say, Tylenol and you wanted to be Advil, I don't know which one is first, but if you were number 2 and you wanted to be number 1, what would you do? And they told us, you have to do a 4-step initiative on how we do that. It'll take longer if you want to be so joyful. But anyway, the point is, that was, say, December, after Senator Kerry had lost the presidential. And in January, President Bush gave really a gift to those who wanted to protect Social Security by saying that he was going to privatize Social Security. I remind you, he's newly elected. He's 58% in the polls. That's very high, especially after a tough fight. And he was very much up here. And our members, working with Senator Reid, Leader Reid in the Senate, with our members, House and Senate, we decided that we were going to go out there to do this. But we had to be unified. It took discipline. And I think you may recall, Rachel, that at the time, we made a decision. I know the publics who are hosts today, thank you, Judy and Peter, they were so much a part of helping us with this. At the time we said, President Bush wants to privatize Social Security, the Democrats want to preserve Social Security. And that was the fight. Social Security, privatize. But people said, oh, why don't you have a plan of your own? Important Democrats were saying, poor Democrats in the House, they don't have a plan of their own. Exactly. Our plan was Social Security. And the private sector advisors said, if you start saying, well, we're going to the age of this, the tax, the this, you will be confused with what he is doing. You must not offer another plan. It has to be about his plan. My colleagues who are here will tell you that on a weekly basis at least, members would come in and say, is it time for us to have a plan yet? And believe me, we probably had 250 plans, House and Senate combined. Is it time for us to have a plan? And I can say to them, never does never work for you. In terms of the contrast, Social Security, privatized. And that's the beginning of the end. And because our members trusted us, Harry and me, trusted the two of us, then we were able to keep people together. President Bush, really a lovely man. No, it really, no, we disagree in terms of policy, but he would say, I'm going to 23 states in 23 days, something like that, and I would say, I want you to go to 46 states in 46 days, and I'll pay your way. Because we are going to be there to inoculate against your message, to protect Social Security and educate as to what you said doesn't work. So at the end of it, I said, nothing. And he said, well, I achieved my goal. I said, you did? Thank God you didn't. He said, no, my goal was to raise awareness as to the challenge that Social Security faces. Well, that's a different goal than what he said. But he gave us the perfect issue. But for us, it wasn't an issue. It was a value. It was an ethic. It was who we are as a country. And we were going to fight that fight, even if it meant taking the slings and arrows of our friends who were saying, why don't you have a plan? 4 years, they don't have a plan. Some, even in the media, saying, how can you possibly come here without a plan? We have a plan. It's called Social Security. So with that, that would really, by September, he was at 38. But we worked, you take this chance to say, we worked with President Bush on many issues. We passed the biggest energy bill ever to pass in our country, lowering the CAFE standards, the emissions, and with conservation and efficiencies and the rest. Hugely important bill. We worked with him on his version of the stimulus package was to make sure it was refundable so that poor people and poor families and families with children could get the stimulus too. We worked with him on PEPFAR. That was a great thing that President Bush did, but it would not have happened without a Democratic Congress funding it from $4 billion to $8 billion, and some of the people who worked on that are the ladies out here from the But anyway, some of our colleagues who worked on that issue know that it was the House and the Congress that made that possible. And we worked with him on probably the most unpopular bill that anybody will ever vote for, ever, TARP, because we were told that if we had not acted, there would be no economy in 4 days. No economy. Mr. Bernanke, Mr. Chairman, do you agree with the characterization that Secretary Paulson has given to the state of the financial institutions in our country? And he, an expert on the Great Depression, said, if we do not act immediately, we will not have an economy by Monday. This was Thursday night. So we did that. We worked with President Bush. The Republicans did not want to vote with that. I don't want to get partisan. But they didn't want to vote with that. And they didn't. They took the Democratic votes to make that happen. We had some Republican votes, but not nearly what would be expected for such a vote. So in any event, we worked with President Bush every place that we could. That's why it's so odd to see, even though you have differences of opinion, that you don't decide that you're going to find solutions and get results for the American people, recognizing that we're different branches of government, maybe different parties, but we all are Americans and have an obligation to get some results and get the job done. So in any event, that's what we did. We stuck together, we took the heat. Remember when people would say, poor dears, they don't even have a plan? That was the plan.
Well, that was just wonderful. They were absolutely amazing women.
They are amazing. We're going to have to take a short break, though. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
USS Constellation. There's a grand lady in Baltimore who has taken her rightful place as the Inner Harbor's crown jewel in the heart of the Chesapeake Bay. Launched in 1854 as the last all-sail ship designed and built for the United States Navy, Constellation's century of service embraced the ages of sail, steam, gas, diesel, and nuclear power. Imagine that, launched in 1854 and still afloat. Even more exciting, visitors can come aboard Constellation and explore to their heart's content. On board Constellation, history comes alive as visitors touch, feel, and experience what life was like for sailors during the Civil War.
We're back. You can hear some music in the background. We still are on the deck of the USS Constellation. Jackie, with what we've seen so far between Rachel Maddow and Nancy Pelosi, do you have any political aspirations? Does this motivate you to perhaps to run for Congress?
It does. You know, I've always been interested in politics and how it works, and I would love to be in Congress and to make some changes to this country.
Well, if you did that, what would be, I'll give you a second to think about this while I'm asking the question, what would be your first priority? What would you do if you were able to, say you're in the House of Representatives and you were able to introduce a bill? What bill would you introduce?
You know, that is a tough one because we have so many pressing issues today, but I think I would have to, go with the healthcare because that's been such a hot issue lately, and I think it really does need to be resolved.
Right. I think that sounds like a good political answer. I think she has the makings of a politician.
Well, thank you.
Well, with that, Jackie, let's go back and see some more of the show.
The stimulus, health reform, Wall Street reform, student loan reform, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the new GI Bill, the number of major pieces of legislation that you not only saw passed in the House, which we could also include cap and trade, we can include the DREAM Act there, but beyond those, the ones that also became law, is, and I don't just mean to flatter you, but it is the kind of list of legislation that we associate with people after whom we name large buildings in Washington. Your speakership was Sam Rayburn-esque, and I wonder how you connect that list of accomplishments to the idea of political capital. And do you think having accomplished so much made it harder for Democrats to compete in the first midterm election after President Obama was elected in 2010? Did just the magnitude of what you had been able to do legislatively make it easier for Republicans to claim that the pendulum needed to swing back?
I think that if I had to use one word to describe what made the difference in the 2010 election, it would be money. Money. This is really important to know. People said, oh, you did this, you did that. We had 9.5% unemployment. And it's very hard to explain a health care bill or environmental law, whatever it happens to be, when people don't have a job. And they don't want to hear, Rachel, that it would be 15% unemployment, right? My colleagues, Jackie and Doris and Susan. It would be 50, and Anna's here someplace? Okay. But it would be 15%. President Obama was a job creator from day one. Recovery Act, 3.5 million jobs saved or created. Go on from there. But if you don't have a job, you don't really want to hear how bad it could have been. And that's a screen that's very hard to get through. But if you put into that unlimited, undisclosed, special interest money coming in like the last week of the campaign, that is really insurmountable. And that is something, or unsurmountable.
Not so.
Not surmountable. In any event, I think it's really important, and I think that we came to do a job. We didn't come to keep a job or have a job, we came to do a job. So we would never say, well, we would not have done health care or Wall Street reform and the rest. yet all of those, whether it's healthcare industry, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's people against labor, the people who are against collective bargaining, all that kind of money coming in against us, we can contend with if it's accountable. We know who it is, and it's within the limits of the law. But undisclosed, special interest money coming in at the end, that was too much. But we would never trade our accomplishments for anything. But I'll tell you this, because we believe, as with Social Security, as with Medicare, health care for all Americans is a right, not a privilege for just a few, and that was the fight. Make a promise to you, and this is a promise that I made at the invitation of President George Herbert Walker Bush, father, on February 20th was Founders Day, and President's Day, and we were at the University of Texas A&M, College Station, at the site of the Bush Library and the President's School of Government and Public Policy. He invited me there to talk on President's Day. You can just imagine what the Republicans thought of that.
Well, wasn't that inspirational?
It was amazing.
And that, what you heard in the background, was the new cannon on the Constellation, just for our viewers, just in case you wondered what the heck was that. That was not my producer shooting me. That was a cannon on the bow of the Constellation. So
It definitely woke me up.
it did, and probably our audience as well. Not that the topics that we have covered in this show in particular doesn't keep them on their toes.
Oh, absolutely.
That really did. Well, what an honor it was for Top of the Morning to be there. Our producer and director, one of the few women there. There were a number of others that were men, but our Top of the Morning producer and director, Loretta Gubnavis, was honored to be there, as was I.
That is an amazing honor.
Well, it was a very select event, and Top of the Morning was there, and we'll continue to cover those kind of events for you, our audience.
We're aboard the USS Constellation in beautiful downtown Baltimore. I'm Jacqueline Massaro.
I'm Steve I's aunt.
And it's just been a beautiful day here. We've learned so much about women in politics.
We absolutely have. It's just fascinating for Top of the Morning to be at an event like this. It's not something that everyone gets to do, and I hope that our viewers appreciate the time that they were able to spend with Rachel Maddow and Nancy Pelosi and some of the other important women that we interviewed on this show.
Well, it was very moving to me just watching it. I can't imagine what it was like to actually be there.
It was pretty neat, I'll tell you. It was a great place to be.
It sounds like it.
It definitely is. So we're going to go to another clip.
Of this year. And what I told that lovely audience that day, and supposedly the most conservative school in Texas, I don't know, they were lovely. What I told them that day is we must reduce the role of money in politics. We must. We've got to take it to like public funding of campaigns, and we must increase the level of civility in campaigns. And here comes the promise. And when we do, I promise you we will have many more women elected to public office. And young people and minorities represent the diversity of our country. So I think we were something like 250,000 votes from having the majority. They won this big number of votes, but in terms of the majority, it was only 200 votes here, 300 votes here, and that account came from millions of dollars just being poured in the last days that would go unanswered in terms of the misrepresentation. But not to relitigate that, just to spring from that question, but really we have to look to the future and say we have to take back our democracy. This is a government of the plutocracy, of the wealthy, or of the few, oligarchy. That's not what our founders sacrificed their life, liberty, and personal freedom for. This is something else. And nothing less is at stake in this debate than our democracy. Where the voice and the vote of the many determine elections, not the checkbooks of the very, very few. They said that 3 people gave more to Governor Walker last night than all the money raised by Tom Barrett. I mean, it's not, whatever side you're on, maybe you're the one who can raise more of the money. It's not about that. It's about, it's gone too far. It's over the edge. We have to pull it back. And when we do, one of the benefits will be much more diversity and people able to take a chance and run. So their views will be reflected in the Congress.
In terms of getting to that point, and you have consistently talked about public financing for elections and how important that is. You've championed the Disclose Act, for
And so
example.
have you.
Yeah, I've ranted about it. I guess that's different. You've spoken. But one of the things that I think is so important about what's happened in Wisconsin, not just last night, but what gave rise to the recall in the first place, was the fact that the Wisconsin Republicans under Scott Walker were using public policy to essentially dismantle public sector unions in Wisconsin. And that, however you feel about union rights in the country, it had one very practical partisan effect, which is that unions had been big supporters of Democratic candidates and Democratic causes, and had had a lot to do with the Democratic grounding. So if they go away, in terms of whether or not that corporate money that's disproportionately supporting Republicans can be answered, at least on the Democratic side, before there is some kind of reform, Democrats do not have a way to compete in terms of big outside money in elections. And that is the reality now in Wisconsin. It is the reality in states where they have essentially eliminated union rights. And it looks like Republicans, particularly after last night's results, will be emboldened to pursue that in as many states as they can. I think structurally that's a pretty dire electoral situation for Democrats. And I'm wondering if there is a secret Democratic plan B that I don't know about. Something to bridge the distance between now and the 4 days of public financing for elections, which I don't know when that's going to happen.
You mean apart from Rachel Maddow?
Jackie, wasn't that fascinating?
That was the most interesting thing I've seen all day.
You don't often get to see two very important people in the nation having that kind of conversation.
Exactly, and I loved hearing all the interesting facts about her time in Congress and all the different people she had to work with.
Well, Jackie, the Constellation. It's a wonderful, interesting ship. How did you enjoy your day on it?
I loved it. I've never been on a ship that also doubled as a museum. It was really an interesting and wonderful experience.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's fascinating. It's educational. It's also close by, which is something that's important.
That is awesome.
It's the Inner Harbor, and folks ought to think about taking a day trip down here.
Definitely.
Not only is there the USS Constellation that people can visit here, there's a number of other ships in the historic ships collection in the Inner Harbor. There's the Chesapeake Lightship, which is just about a block away. There's a very interesting submarine. And there's also the USS Taney, which bills itself as the last ship afloat from World War II.
Wow.
The Taney was actually in Pearl Harbor in December 7, 1941. They were a few miles away from where all the bombs were, but they fired off a few shots. So there's a wonderful collection of ships to visit, not only the Constellation, but the Lightship, the submarine, and the Taney.
Well, I'll definitely have to check those out.
It's a full day's worth of entertainment
It does sound like it.
in beautiful downtown Baltimore at the Inner Harbor. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed your time in the Constellation. I did as well. So that's our show, Top of the Morning. I'm Steve Izant.
And I'm Jacqueline Massaro.
Thanks for watching. This is Top of the Morning.